Hi besties, or welcome back to my channel. I really hope you're all well. Today I'm coming at you with a video I've been desperate to film for quite some time actually, but I thought I'd wait until the new year and until I'm in my spring cleaning phase. But today I am filming for you a huge book unhaul. I'm starting the year off well. We are decluttering the bookshelves, we are making space for the new arrivals, and we are getting rid of everything that just no longer serves us physically, mentally, spiritually, you know. So that's what we're doing today. We're doing a huge book unhaul. I have 30 books sat by me here that are all hopefully going to find some lovely new homes. So I'm going to offer them out to my friends first and see if any of them want to take them off my hands. And then if they don't, I'm going to donate them to various different charity shops around the local area, just so that people have a nice selection of books to enjoy. I'm also at a point now where something exciting is hopefully going to be happening at some point in the next 6 months, which I realise I know I've teased to you guys in so many videos over the last 12 months, but honestly when I reveal what is happening it will make a lot of sense. But basically I need to downsize my book collection massively, so this is kind of the first installment of that, I suppose. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into it. I have 3 piles sat next to me. I'm going to start with this one here. This is mostly actually modern classics. I have some manga, I have some contemporary, I have some horror, but we're going to get started with the modern classics. And first on the list is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I absolutely hated this book. I hated this book so much. I hated it more than I could put into words. It's literally probably one of my least favourite books I have ever read. I love the film. I love the film. I hate the book. I hate the book. So in case you didn't guess, I really did not enjoy Little Women. I think I read that in 2020. My friends and I started to do a book club each month, and that was my friend Alex's pick. She wanted to be cultured and she wanted to read a classic, so she chose that one and then regretted it straight away. And we all regretted it too. Anyway, next up we have Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. I'm just not going to read this again. This is the same for majority of these. I'm just not going to read this one again. I kept In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, mostly because I also kept On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and I hated that book, but I kept it because I'm trash for Matt Healy, and I know that Matt Healy likes In Cold Blood and On the Road because he references both so much, so therefore I kept them because one day I will marry that man. Today, however, is not that day, and I'm getting rid of Breakfast at Tiffany's. I'm also getting rid of The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. Just never gonna read it again. And also I was kind of disappointed by this actually. I thought this was going to be a lot better than it was, but yeah, I honestly actually just don't even remember reading it at all. This is supposed to be what would happen if the Nazis had won World War II. Clearly it was very memorable. Then we have The Diary of a Provincial Lady by E.M. Delafield. This is actually a bind up of I think 5 different books. I actually, you know what, I quite enjoyed this when I read it. It was just one of those reads that you're just like, it's very wholesome. This actually gave me what I wish Little Women had given me but didn't. I think because this was less like shoving morals down your throat, whereas Little Women was very much throwing morals at you, and also I was personally offended by the fact they were spinsters at the age of 20 if they were unmarried, and I'm like, I'm 30 now, this is fine. Also Alone in Berlin by Hans Verlade. I read this, I think, God, back in 2016. I read most of these actually back in 2016. I was going through a modern classics phase. I was wanting to broaden my literary horizons, open my mind to books that weren't just contemporary, and I actually really enjoyed doing it, but that one just not for me. Not for me. It was an inspiring story actually, and I did very much enjoy the messaging behind it. I just am never going to read it again. Next we have The Night Manager by Jean Le Carre, which again I enjoyed. I'm just not going to read it again. Can't even remember what this one's about. A night manager at a luxury hotel, something, people dying, I don't know. And then also we have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Casey. I really enjoyed this and I love the film, but I'm just not going to read it again. And to be honest, at this point, because I've read it, I would rather, I think if I'm going to delve back into that story, I would rather watch the movie, which is fine. It's fine. So that's all the classics done. I've got a smaller pile here which I'm going to duck down and pick up, but you're not going to see through the power of editing. So I want to preface this by saying I didn't dislike all these books. I actually quite liked some of them, but again, I'm just not going to read them again, and I'm trying to be really ruthless. If I'm not going to read a book again, I'm not keeping it. If I'm not emotionally or sentimentally massively attached to it, I'm not keeping it. If the book hasn't fundamentally changed the chemical balance of my brain, I'm not keeping it. So we're starting off with Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, which I'm pretty sure I gave either a 4 or a 5 star. I also, this, to be fair, it did alter my chemical brain balance because it gave me a massive existential crisis. But, as do all of Sally Rooney's books, I just don't feel the need to keep it. I'm not going to pick it up and read it again. My mum's not going to read it because she doesn't like Sally Rooney's writing, as we've discovered with her trying to read normal people. So I'm just not, I don't need to keep it, you know? So I'm not going to. Goodbye. One of my most disappointing reads from 2021, and to be honest, I shouldn't be surprised by this because of all the controversy surrounding this book. Like, I should have expected it. I should have known that this book was going to be a hot freaking mess, but I bought it because I wanted to see if the hype was real. It's not even hype, the anti-hype. And also because it was marketed so well. It was marketed as like everything I love in a book, and then I read it and it put me in the biggest reading slump right before Christmas. Like, I read this, I think, in November. It took me most of November to get through, and I hated every single second of it, and that is Lightlark by Alex Astor. I think I gave it 2 stars in the end because I always feel really guilty giving books 1 star. But this, honestly, this was just not for me in any way, shape or form. Like, this was marketed originally as like The Hunger Games meets ACOTAR, which to me sounds like my personal blend of like freaking perfection, right? It did not deliver on any of those claims. Now, it did feel very fairy tale-esque, which I did like. I enjoyed the whimsical fairy tale vibes, but then I just found myself completely lost during this plot. I could not tell you what happens in this book. I could not tell you what was happening in the book whilst reading the book. And I think at that point, that is when you know that something is just badly written. If you can't even tell what is happening when you're reading it, there's a problem, you know? And this was a problem. This is the problem. I'm not the problem here. Lightlark is the problem, and so therefore I'm getting rid of it because it was terrible and I hated every second. Then we have A Hard Cash Valley by Brian Penowik. This I gave, I think, 3 stars too. I was actually really disappointed by this as well because I expected this to be so much more. I literally saw this in Barnes & Noble in 2020, and then I left it in Barnes & Noble in 2020 because I was trying to be good. And then I thought about it pretty much every time I entered a bookshop, either side of the Atlantic, for a solid 12 months. So then I did pick it up because I was like, clearly this book is speaking to me on like a fundamentally like deep level, you know? It didn't deliver. I was expecting this to be super thrilling. I was expecting it to be, it's described as like a country noir. And I love that description, first of all, because that just appeals to me on like a fundamentally deep human level. But yes, it did live up to that in some ways, but I just think the pacing was off for this. I think this could have been really compelling, and this could have delivered in the way that I wanted it to had the pacing been different, but I think it was just very slow. It was incredibly descriptive, which I like because it did paint a very vivid portrayal of where they were in rural Georgia, and I loved that. But I don't know, it just didn't hit for me in the way that I needed it to hit, and therefore I'm just not going to hang on to it. I do love the cover though. But anyway, yeah, I didn't love this as much as I wanted to love it, so it's going to find a new home. As is Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. So I did actually originally film a vlog of me reading this, and the vlog was going to be called I Read Ice Planet Barbarian So That You Don't Have To. And I'm still semi-tempted to put it up. Actually, no, can I even put it up, or did I delete the footage? You know what, I think I deleted the footage. If I didn't delete the footage and you want to see it, let me know in the comments and I will put on my little community page if I have kept the footage anywhere. I can't remember why I deleted it. I think because it had been that long since I filmed it that I didn't know if it still felt relevant or not. But yeah, Ice Planet Barbarians, this... I got this as like an experiment because everybody on Booktok was obviously talking about this and it went super viral, and I was like, is this going to be one of those things that I think sounds totally ridiculous and then I read it and I love it, or is this going to be one of those things I think sounds totally ridiculous and then I read it and I hate it? It turns out it was the latter. Now, I actually saw people, so I saw Chandler Ainsley say that this actually was, I think she gave it like 5 stars, and it was like smut with the plot. That's what she said. So I went into it with high hopes and I could not really find the plot. It just felt like gratuitous sex scenes for very little reason. There was no payoff. I was just bitterly disappointed by it. There felt like no urgency. There was no real like issue that they had to solve, you know, aside from like the obvious being stranded on an alien planet. But like that was sorted like pretty early on in the book, you know, and there was no kind of like third act problem to solve before it all wrapped up. It was like, we're stranded on like an alien planet, oh, woo, oh my gosh, there's this big blue guy with a huge dick that I'm gonna have sex with lots, woo, oh my gosh, are the aliens gonna come back? Oh no, they're not, it's fine, the end. But the whole are the aliens gonna come back thing, it wasn't a problem. Like, it was mentioned in like one paragraph and then never really referred to again. So yeah, it was not for me. It's not for me. I didn't like the world building, I didn't like the characters, didn't like the writing, the smut wasn't even that great, so I was just like, yeah, you know what, big blue alien guys, not my bag. No shade to anyone who's into that, but it's definitely not my kink. Then we have another really disappointing one actually, and this is You've Reached Sound by Dustin Tao. I think I gave this 3 stars. I read this one as part of the Gilmore-a-thon in October, was that November? I think it might have been November actually. And this one I think fulfilled 2 prompts. It had leaves on the cover, and it also fulfilled the prompt for Asian representation, because it was both an Asian author and I think both main characters Asian, or is it just one? Can't remember. Well, at least one of the main characters is Asian as well, if not both. So yeah, I liked this. I did like it. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was cute. I think this was just a little bit too YA for me. You know, I have to remember that I'm not the target audience for this book, so I think, you know, had I read this when I was 14 or 15, I think I probably would have got a lot more from it. It was a lovely depiction of grief in the sense that I think it really hammered home the message that everybody grieves differently, and that, you know, if somebody is going through the grieving process, whether that looks like the grieving process looks like for you, or whether it looks completely different, everybody deserves the respect and the support and the love and the guidance through that, rather than, you know, it all being like a one-size-fits-all thing. But yeah, I just found this fundamentally not it for me. The main character wasn't particularly likable. I didn't find it as sad as I wanted to. I think I went into this expecting it to be like a huge tearjerker, a huge tearjerker, and that's where it just didn't hit. Black Mamba is a book that I read in October. I picked this up, this is the author's debut, it's by William Friend, and I picked it up because it sounded absolutely terrifying. On the back it just says, "Daddy, there's a man in our room," and it's basically about this guy who's just lost his wife, and his twin daughters wake up one day convinced there's a man in their room, but there isn't, and then this happens repeatedly, and then one day the man goes. And then the next day they start talking about their invisible friend, Black Mamba, who becomes this like insidious presence in their lives, and it's all very, very sinister. And it turns out there's a lot of parallels between what the kids are experiencing and then what his wife and her twin experienced when they were kids. And then there's this whole cult thing. It was good in the sense that, you know, it was a quick read. It was relatively entertaining. I think my problem with this is that I went into it expecting to be terrified and wanting to be terrified, and that's the important thing. If I'm reading horror, I want to like finish the book and feel incredibly fearful. I want the kind of book that's going to make me sleep with the lights on. Alright, that is what I'm looking for when I read horror, and especially because I'm reading adult horror, you'd think I'd find it. However, apparently not, because this was not it. I was moderately creeped out, but I wasn't horrified by it, and so therefore it's gone. This one actually genuinely saddens me, because this was my first Katie Robert book and I wanted to love her book so much, and this was just not the one, and this is Court of the Vampire Queen. Now, I'm not saying I didn't like it, I'm just saying it wasn't it. So I thought I was going to love this because it's like reverse horror and vampires, right? Like my 2 favourite things. So I thought this was going to be like the ultimate smutty romance for me. And I think it would have worked better if this hadn't been a bind up of 3 novellas. But because it was a bind up, there was just too much repetition, too many like little plot holes that were more noticeable because you were reading all 3 like back to back in one like fell swoop. And it just, I don't know, it was just lacking something for me. It just wasn't what I wanted it to be. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, and that is why it is not staying in my collection. And then finally on this pile we have Mary, An Awakening of Terror, another horror that I read in October, which again I really wanted to scare me so much, and I thought it was going to, because it sounded totally terrifying, but this one was just not for me. And I actually spoke at length more about this in my October wrap-up, which I will link, because I think I probably spoke about it better and more succinctly than I can do right now, because I'm obviously, you know, 3 months out of this book. But this one, this has midsummer vibes. It's sold as having midsummer vibes, and it absolutely does. It was a very strange read. It was very different to what I expected, and just not kind of the terrifying psychological horror that I wanted it to be. However, it was a very interesting portrayal of the menopause, and obviously it was kind of, I think, an extended metaphor for that, and for like the experience women have losing themselves in that time of their life. So it was interesting. It was an interesting concept. It wasn't badly executed, but it just wasn't what I wanted, and therefore, again, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, which is why I'm not keeping it. Okay team, we're getting somewhere. We are getting somewhere. Okay, so we have, first of all, on this pile of disappointments and sadness, The Grimrose Girls by Laura Poll. I picked this one up in Barnes & Noble in March last year when I went over to the States for my birthday, and this, I think, was their book of the month, or their YA book of the month, and it sounded really good. It sounded like quite dark academia. It sounded like it, I don't know, it had like something to it, you know, so I picked it up. I was full of anticipation and hope, and then I was bitterly disappointed. So this, yeah, like I say, it was sold as like a dark academia. It says 1 murdered girl, 4 troubled friends, and a fate they can't escape, and it's basically set in this like private boarding school, and I think it's like a girls' school actually, and there's this group of girls, and one of their best friends is murdered, and then they're trying to get over her death. It's things like the first day of term. It's termed as a suicide, but they're convinced it's not. And then this other girl turns up and takes over her like room and everything else, and these girls end up accepting her into their friendship group, and then they realise there's this like curse on the school or something, and all hell breaks loose. So this is actually supposed to be, I think, a series, and I think each book, sorry, is going to be loosely based on a different fairy tale, because the curse is linked to fairy tales coming true. I hated this book. I hated the writing. So many unbelievable plot holes. It irritated the hell out of me. It was just one of those where I was reading it, and the whole time I was reading it, I was like, how did this get published in this state? Like, the idea behind it, great. The execution, not great. Could have done with a whole other round of editing. And then I think if it had gone through a whole other round of editing, it might have actually become something really brilliant. But it just, no. It fell so flat for me, and I'm pretty sure I actually gave it like a 1 star. It was that bad. So it is going, just finding a new home, as is Shutter by Melissa Larson, which I think I can't remember if I picked that up in March this year, or if I picked that up in 2021. Might have been 2021 I picked this one up actually. So this is a horror, and this is about a girl who wants to become an actress, and she gets the opportunity to go and star in this kind of like indie horror film, and she realizes when she gets there that basically it's only her and like 3 other people in the cast, and then there's like the lighting person and the director, and she's like, I don't actually know anything about, first of all, the movie or the director or anything else, and she realizes that she's just been like left on this island, and like she doesn't know the people that she's been left with, and it's all very unsettling and weird. It was okay. I think I gave it like 1 or 2 stars because it was just kind of boring. I didn't feel any urgency. I didn't feel any terror. There just seemed to be no motivation really for anything that was happening in this book, and it was honestly just like a great letdown. It says here it's like taut and barbed as razor wire in the tradition of Patricia Highsmith and Daphne du Maurier, a stunning debut. I think comparing this to du Maurier is just a total insult, to be honest, because if they're trying to compare this to the sheer beauty that is something like Rebecca, no. Then we have volumes 1 to 3 of Death Note, the Black Edition. I'm only getting rid of this because honestly I just don't think I can be bothered carrying on with it. I enjoyed it. I didn't hate it. I'm not a manga girly, and it's not for lack of trying either. Like, I want to be. I just don't think I found the right one for me, and I was enjoying Death Note, but it just felt like just too much of a commitment, and I just didn't care enough to keep going with it and to keep finding the volumes, and because I mean, like, these are expensive as well, you know, and I couldn't be bothered. So I'm not carrying on. Last year in February I did Blind Date with a Book. I don't know if you guys will remember. I can't even remember if I filmed it. Actually no, it was on TikTok. my friend Jess and I both went to Manchester in February last year, and Waterstones had a blind date with a book promotion on for their teen and YA section. Obviously that is where they cover the books in brown paper, and then they give like a basic synopsis of like mystery, thriller, whatever, and then a couple of books that it compares to. So I picked this one. I can't remember why I picked it now, but in that package was Dark and Shallow Lies by Ginny Myers-San, and I liked the vibe of this because it's set in the New Orleans Bayou, and it was very atmospheric, and it was, when I read it, that is one thing I would give to this, the atmosphere was so vivid. It was wonderful. I can't actually remember why I didn't like this so much now. I think I read this back in like August or September. There was just something missing for me from this. I didn't hate it, but it just wasn't what I was looking for. I feel like I just expected it to be maybe a little scarier, and I think I expected there just to be a little bit more intensity and a bit more urgency about it, and again there just wasn't. But it did build an incredibly vivid like setting, and for that alone I guess it's worth the read. I mean, I'm just not going to read it again. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. This is another 5-star read that I'm getting rid of actually, and I'm pretty sure I've actually annotated it in places. Yeah, I have. So I mean, I actually feel a little bit guilty for getting rid of it now, because I always feel bad like donating books I've highlighted or whatever. This is called True Story by Kate Reed Petty, and I picked this one up with my friend Holly last year, and like I said, I gave it 5 stars, and it is about like rape culture in American colleges. And it's about a girl who gets raped at a frat party, and then kind of the fallout from that and what happens to the guys and how they kind of get away with it. It is fantastic. It is very thought-provoking. Like, there was a quote that I just read then which really hit, and it says, the story about things that happened while I was asleep. It's your story, you would say. If you don't let it out, it will take over your life. But the story is mine only as the victim owns the prosecution or the whale the harpoon. Telling it has always been the privilege of the perpetrators who have the actual facts, and of the bystanders like you who believe they know. It was just, yeah, it was very hard-hitting and a very important read actually. Like, I really enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it, but I'm just not going to read it again. So I feel like I want to pass it on for somebody else who may get something from it in the same way that I did, basically. So there's that. Then we have Lore by Alexandra Bracken. I think I gave this one 3 stars. This is another YA fantasy. It's rooted deep in Greek mythology, and you know what, it was good. And I actually had this on my TBR pile for so long. This is one of those books that I was like, if I don't get to it this year, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm probably not going to do anything, but I need to get to it this year. So I read it last year. It was okay. It was just a whole lot of average. Like, it was fine. I think, again, I would have enjoyed this had I been a bit younger. It was just kind of like lacking what I look for in a compelling fantasy book as an adult, and that's fine because I'm not the target audience for this. But I wanted to give it a go anyway, so I did. I didn't hate it, didn't love it, but I do love the cover. Then we have one that I read a little bit more recently, and that is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. And again, this is another one that I really wanted to love more, but I actually just found this one ultimately very confusing. So this is, I said Gideon the Ninth, right? This is like an adult high fantasy, and I believe it's a trilogy, and it's basically about lesbian necromancers in space. And honestly, like, the first couple of pages, I kept picking this up and putting this down in Waterstones, and then read the first page and I was like, okay, yes, I need to read this, because the first page, it's a very compelling opening, but then it just kind of like peters off, and I didn't continue to find myself compelled. I found myself just very confused about what was going on, and I don't know if it's because I was reading it after having not read any kind of adult fantasy for a while and I just wasn't used to read, but then also no, because no, I just found it very confusing. And I'm not the only person who said this either. I did look on Goodreads, and quite a few people said that they spent the whole time like not really knowing what on earth was going on. There is a part of me that wants to read the rest of the series and just, you know, think, fuck it, let's try it. But also I just don't know that I have the brain capacity for that. And I'm thinking, all the books that I buy now, I want to be more considered with what I'm buying, and I want to buy things because I know that I'm actually going to like them, not just because like, oh fuck it, we'll see, you know. So anyway, I'm getting rid of this one, but I think my friends will probably pick this one up. I have someone in mind actually for this one who I think will really enjoy it. So yeah, That's Gideon the Ninth. Then I have volumes 1 to 4 of OHara Ride, or OHara Read. I don't actually even know how you pronounce this one. This is a really, really cute little manga series, and I was really enjoying it, but these volumes are really hard to find, and I got to the point where I was just getting sick and tired of not being able to keep up with them, and they're expensive as hell, and I was like, I'm over it. Similarly, really, to how I felt about Death Note. So yeah, I'm just getting rid. I didn't hate them. I actually really quite enjoyed them. I think they're pretty cute, but yeah, I just can't be bothered. Like I said, I'm not a manga girly, even though I want to be a manga girly, so they're going. And then finally, on a similar vein, is Tommy by Junji Ito. I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed it perfectly fine. I'm just not going to reread it, and I'm not going to read any of his others because I'm just not there, not in that mindset. So I'm getting rid. So that is all the books that I am unhauling and decluttering from my bookshelves for 2023. Why am I not in focus? I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, please do let me know by hitting the thumbs up button, commenting down below if there's any of these books that you have unhauled, any of these books that you've loved, any books that you think that I will love based upon what I've told you that I don't love. And don't forget to subscribe if you are new. I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye guys.